Top 10 games to show off your gaming PC. Even with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X making the rounds, PC remains the platform to play on if you're looking for the best in terms of visual quality for your gaming setup. With features like NVIDIA's Deep Learning Super Sampling and DirectX 12 ray tracing, gaming PCs have the features and horsepower needed to push games with the best graphics to their limits. Number 10. Assassin's Creed VALHALLA. Assassin's Creed VALHALLA is still using the Anvil Next 2.0 engine that Odyssey and Origins used, and on PC, the three games are very close when it comes to overall visual quality. We're giving this slot to VALHALLA, not only because it's one of the best Assassin's Creed games, as well as the most recent, but also because it offers a nice setting change from the games that preceded it. As expected from a modern, open-world Ubisoft game, Assassin's Creed VALHALLA looks great, but it's the game's snow-filled setting that makes it stand apart from Origins and Odyssey. VALHALLA doesn't have ray tracing or many of the visual features that other games on this list will showcase. VALHALLA is using an engine from 2014 after all. Despite that, VALHALLA remains a visual powerhouse that can go up against any of the games on this list, especially with HDR turned on during gameplay. Number 9. Godfall. Godfall isn't a great game, but it sure is a pretty one. There's almost nothing interesting about Godfall from a gameplay perspective. It's a self-proclaimed looter slasher, and sure enough, the game revolves around slicing and dicing baddies to earn better loot. It's not that the system is bad, just look at Borderlands 3 and Destiny 2. It's just that Godfall doesn't do anything to further it. If you're a fan of action RPGs, you've played Godfall before. You haven't seen Godfall before, however. With ray-traced reflections and enough particle effects to make you sick to your stomach, Godfall is a game that goes beyond just being visually impressive. Although Godfall might not hook you for hours like Borderlands 3, it's still a fun time in short bursts. And that's when it looks its best too. Godfall has a gorgeous visual design. Even if developer Counterplay Games decided to reuse much of that visual design throughout the game. Number 8. Battlefield 5. Although the Battlefield franchise has always been known for excellent visuals, it wasn't until Battlefield 3 that the series started pushing in a hyper-realistic direction. Battlefield 5 is no different, though it has one unique advantage over its predecessors: ray tracing. The bombastic lens flares and larger-than-life explosions burst off-screen with ray tracing turned on, but you'll need an extremely powerful computer to render all of those reflections. Battlefield 5 doesn't require much in its base configuration. You can get by with a GTX 1050 and 6th generation Core i5. With DirectX ray tracing though, the recommended specs are a 2nd gen Ryzen 7 or 8th gen Core i7, as well as an RTX 2080 and 16 GB of RAM. Simply put, if you're running Battlefield 5 with ray tracing and hitting consistent frame rates, you have one crazy powerful computer. If that doesn't count for bragging rights, we don't know what does. Number 7. Control. From Max Payne to Quantum Break, Finnish developer Remedy Entertainment always pushes the graphics envelope forward. In its latest release, Control is no different. Control is a perfect showcase for how ray tracing can elevate an environment, with lighting bouncing off every possible surface inside the oldest house. Although Control has a stark visual style, the environments themselves don't have too much going on, outside of a whole lot of concrete, that is. With Remedy's excellent lighting system though, even concrete looks good. The big reason we love Control's graphics is DLSS 2.0, a common thread throughout multiple entries on this list. The technical details behind DLSS are frankly a little dry. In short though, DLSS uses machine learning to essentially upscale your games. If you have Control running at 1440p, for example, DLSS will render the game at 1080p and then upscale it to 1440p based off the references the AI has. The end result is simple. Games run with higher frame rates and resolutions with fewer system resources, and Control is an excellent showcase of that. Number 6. Metro Exodus. The dreaded but can it run Crysis question continues to this day, despite the fact that Crysis was released in 2007. For PC gaming circles, the benchmark for computing power was quickly replaced by Metro 2033 when it was released in 2010, and the series has remained a pillar of PC performance since. The latest entry, Metro Exodus, is fit with all of the current graphical trends, including real-time ray tracing, per-object motion blur, and liberal use of tessellation. Metro Exodus is crisis for 2020. Everything comes down to the rendering. Although there are quite a few low-resolution textures in the game, they rarely detract from the gaming experience given how much else it has going on. Metro Exodus is a visual masterpiece, and although seeing it running on consoles is nothing short of mesmerizing, the game looks and feels at home on PC. If you want to see what next-gen visuals look like, Metro Exodus is for you. Number 5. Final Fantasy 15. Say what you will about Final Fantasy 15 as a game, we certainly didn't take kindly to it in our roundup of the best Final Fantasy games, but there's no denying it's a visual powerhouse. The install size alone tells you everything you need to know. Final Fantasy 15 needs about 150 gigabytes of space to install, and once the dirty work is done, it takes up more than 100 gigabytes on your hard drive. It'll even put the highest power machines in check. We couldn't hit 4K at 60 frames per second with a 1080 Ti even. If you have the power though, there are few games that look as good as Final Fantasy 15. Even if you don't have the power, you can endlessly tweak the graphic settings. From the amount of RAM you're dedicating to textures to NVIDIA Hairworks, Final Fantasy 15 has a setting for everything. Number 4. Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. The Call of Duty series has always focused on performance over visuals, making each entry look as good as possible while keeping a solid 60 FPS, even on consoles. 2019's Modern Warfare and the free-to-play add-on Warzone are no different. However, because of the focus on performance for this Battle Royale game, it's easy to forget how far the Call of Duty series has come. Going back and playing the original Modern Warfare, it's clear that Activision's blockbuster series has grown beyond higher resolution textures and better lighting effects. The level of detail in Modern Warfare is stunning, even down to how colors are portrayed in the game. Combined with ray tracing, Modern Warfare brings a depth to the game world that few titles can rival. The visual style only is furthered by the sound design, with both elements working together to bring a visceral sense of realism. Number 3. Red Dead Redemption 2. If you want to see what your PC is made of, boot up Red Dead Redemption 2. Notoriously under-optimized upon launch, Rockstar's open-world epic beat even the fieriest graphics cards into submission. Since launch, Rockstar has issued several performance patches, but you'll still need a hefty rig to see Arthur Morgan in his full glory. As is the case with most other console ports, the visual buff to Red Dead Redemption 2 comes down to two things: higher frame rates and resolution. There also are some other not-so-obvious improvements too. Draw distances, for example, are much better on PC, with fine detail even on distant mountains. The same goes for tessellation on trees and foliage, as well as global illumination and ambient occlusion. These environmental effects may not be the bread and butter that makes Red Dead Redemption 2 look so good, but they add a level of realism. And for a game focused entirely on that, there's nothing better. Number 2. Hitman 2. Hitman 2 is one of the few games on this list that will push your GPU and CPU to their limits. 2016's Hitman wasn't the most well-optimized game, stretching the limits of chips at the time to the point where players with top-of-the-line gear were getting less than 30 FPS in certain sections. Thankfully, IO Interactive solved these performance issues with Hitman 2. Visually, the games look the same, though with Hitman 2's performance improvements, it ends up looking better overall. You don't get a sense of how much it stresses a CPU until you boot up the game. The Hitman franchise is known for huge maps with countless unique ways to take down your target. That means a lot of NPCs and interactive elements, pushing your PC as it renders not only the character models and animations, but also the intelligence behind them. Number 1. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. A game from 2015 on a list written in 2021? Yep. The Witcher 3 looks as good as it did 5 years ago, and that's saying something. Bloodborne was also released in 2015, and that game is more than a little rough around the edges by modern standards. It's CD Projekt Red's dedication to PC as a platform that allows The Witcher 3 to shine. It's a scalable game with a slew of rendering effects to push even modern PCs to their limits. It struggles in one area though: textures. No matter how many graphical options you turn on, The Witcher 3's textures still look like they're 5 years old. They certainly look good, just not in the realm of best graphics of all time. No epic PC RPG is above a few mods though, and the community has been hard at work updating The Witcher 3. The extremely popular HD Reworked project has nearly 1 million downloads on Nexus Mods, replacing the simpler geometry and textures of the base game with beautiful 4K scans. The results are stunning. Most PC graphic mods verge into the cinematic territory, where the modder takes a liberal amount of artistic license. Like some popular Skyrim mods, the HD Reworked project retains the exact look and feel of the base game, just with some slightly higher quality visuals. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to The Daily Hit for more videos. See you on the next video.